A small-town man bought a strip of land nobody wanted for $47, and 23 years later, a developer's billion-dollar project froze because of it. What did he know that everyone else missed? The lawyer's voice cracked on the third ring. He said the words, "We have a problem," before he said hello, and then he said them again, louder, because the man on the other end of the line had not answered yet. The man was Henry Voss. He was 71. He was sitting at his kitchen table in a small Georgia town called Boone Hollow, drinking black coffee from a cup his wife had given him in 1979. He let the lawyer talk. The lawyer said the developer was furious. The lawyer said the project was frozen. The lawyer said $300 million in financing was sitting in a bank in Atlanta and could not move until Henry signed a paper. Henry took a slow sip. He said, "Tell him no." He hung up. His wife, Marlene, looked up from her crossword. She did not ask who it was. She had not asked who it was for 23 years. She just smiled and went back to 7 across. Rewind to the spring of 2002. Henry was 48 then. He worked at the lumber yard off Route 19. He drove a Ford pickup that already had 200,000 miles on it. He was the kind of man people in Boone Hollow forgot was in the room until he spoke, and even then they sometimes kept talking. The county auction was on a Saturday morning in March. It was held in the back of the courthouse. There was a folding table. There was a coffee pot with a paper sign that said 50 cents. There were 4 locals leaning against the wall. There was a clerk with a clipboard. And there was a man named Walter Greaves. Walter Greaves was 41. He wore a navy suit and a thin gold watch. He owned a development firm in Atlanta called Greaves Capital Partners. He had driven down that morning in a black SUV. He had a driver waiting outside with the engine running. He bought 80 acres of pine that backed onto Highway 41 for $210,000. He signed the papers in 3 places. He shook the clerk's hand. He looked at his watch. Then the clerk said there was one more parcel, a small one. Lot 17B, 12 feet wide, half a mile long, a strip of weeds and red clay running between 2 old farms. The opening bid was $47. Walter Greaves laughed. It was a real laugh, sharp and loud, the kind of laugh that fills a small room and makes the 4 locals against the wall shift on their feet. He said, $47 for a ditch? He waved his hand at the clerk. He told her not to waste his time. He turned back to his papers. Henry raised his hand. The clerk looked at him. She had known Henry since the 2nd grade. She gave him a small nod. She said, 47 going once. Walter looked up. Going twice. Walter snorted, sold to Mr. Voss. Walter looked at Henry the way a man looks at a stray dog at a wedding. He shook his head. He turned to the clerk and asked if there was anything else worth bidding on. The clerk said no. Walter walked out without looking at Henry again. He paid in cash, 2 20s, a 5, and 2 1s from the front pocket of his coat. The clerk wrote out a receipt. She signed it. She stamped it with the county seal. She slid it across the folding table. Henry folded the receipt twice. He slid it into the inside pocket of his coat. He buttoned the coat over it. He walked outside. The locals were still leaning against the wall. One of them, a man named Earl, called after him. Earl said, "Henry, what in the world you want with that ditch?" Henry didn't turn around. He said, "It's not a ditch." He got in his truck. He sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. He could see Walter Greaves's black SUV at the end of the street, the brake lights flashing once before it pulled onto the highway. He started the engine. He drove home the long way, past the south end of the county, past the 80 acres Walter Greaves had just bought, past the strip of red clay that was now his. He drove slowly. He looked at the strip for a long time. That night, Marlene asked him about the auction. She poured him a second cup of coffee. She set it down on the kitchen table without a sound. Henry took the receipt out of his coat pocket. He smoothed it flat. He set it next to his coffee cup. He looked at it. He did not put it away. Marlene asked, "Did you get what you wanted?" Henry said, "Yes." She waited. He did not say anything else. She nodded once and went to bed. Henry sat at the table alone for a long time. The kitchen was quiet. The clock above the stove ticked. The coffee in his cup had gone cold. He picked up the receipt. He read the lot number. He read the price. He read the date. He put it back in his coat pocket. Before this gets even crazier, hit that subscribe button. Because what Henry pulls out of a dusty county binder next is the kind of thing that makes billion-dollar developers lose sleep. Stay till the end, because the look on Walter Greaves's face when he finally figures it out is worth every second. He thought about Walter Greaves laughing in the courthouse. He thought about the 80 acres. He thought about Highway 41 and the black SUV pulling away. He thought about a piece of paper in the basement of the county records office, tucked into a folder nobody had opened since 1956. He had heard about it once, years before, from his Uncle Roy. He had not been sure what it meant then. He was sure now. He smiled just a little into his coffee cup. He had not told Marlene yet. He had not told anyone. But Henry Voss knew something nobody else in that courthouse knew, and he was willing to wait. October 14th, 2002, the Boone Hollow Public Library, a green-shaded reading lamp, a stack of black binders labeled County Road Filings, 1948, 1962. Henry sat at the long oak table in the back. His coat was folded over the chair beside him. The receipt was still in the pocket. He had not taken it out in 7 months. The librarian was a woman named Iris. She had pulled the binders for him without asking why. He had been coming in every Tuesday and Thursday since April. He was looking for one piece of paper. He had heard about it once 26 years earlier from his Uncle Roy, who had worked at the County Roads Department until 1981. Roy had told the story over Thanksgiving dinner in 1976. Henry had been 22. He had only half listened. He remembered enough. He remembered Roy saying the state had once planned to widen Highway 41 into a 4-lane corridor. He remembered Roy saying the plan was killed in 1958 when the budget collapsed. He remembered Roy saying the strange part, the part that bothered him. The corridor had never been formally dissolved. The right-of-way was still on the books. It took Henry 6 months to find the document. It was filed under the wrong heading. It was in a binder marked Drainage, Rural. It was a single sheet typed on a typewriter, dated June 11, 1956. It was titled Resolution 56-114, Reservation of Easement Corridor, Highway 41 Expansion, Boone Hollow Township. It described a strip of land 12 feet wide running half a mile along the South County line. It said the corridor was reserved in perpetuity for state road expansion or, in the alternative, for any future right-of-way required by adjacent commercial development of more than 50 acres. It said the corridor passed through Lot 17B. Henry read it twice, then a third time. He did not photocopy it. He wrote it down by hand, in pencil, in a small green notebook Marlene had given him for his birthday in 1998. He closed the binder. He thanked Iris. He drove home. He spread a piece of butcher paper on the kitchen table that night. He drew the strip. He drew the 80 acres Walter Greaves had bought. He drew Highway 41. He drew the property lines on either side of the strip. 2 old farms, one owned by an estate in probate, the other owned by a widow named Miss Doreen Pickett, who had been trying to sell for years. The kettle whistled. Marlene poured 2 cups. She looked at the map. She looked at her husband. She said, "Why does that little strip matter so much?" Henry tapped the corridor with his pencil. He said, "Because nothing on either side of it can grow without crossing it." She nodded slowly. She did not ask anything else. She kissed the top of his head and went to bed. Over the next 4 years, Henry watched. In the spring of 2003, survey flags appeared along the south edge of the 80 acres. Orange ribbons on wooden stakes. A truck from a firm called Ridgeline Surveying parked there for 3 days. Henry wrote it in the notebook. In the fall of 2004, a chain-link fence went up around the 80 acres. A sign was posted. Greaves Capital Partners, no trespassing. Henry wrote it in the notebook. In the summer of 2005, the estate that owned the farm to the east of the strip sold. The buyer was an LLC called Pine Hollow Holdings. Henry drove to the county clerk's office. The registered agent was a law firm in Atlanta, the same firm that represented Greaves Capital Partners. He wrote it in the notebook. In the spring of 2006, Ms. Doreen Pickett sold her farm to the west of the strip. The buyer was an LLC called South 40 Holdings. Same law firm, same registered agent. He wrote it in the notebook. He sat at the kitchen table that night with the notebook open. Marlene set down a fresh cup of coffee. She said, "They're buying everything around it." He said, "Yes." She said, And they don't know about the corridor. He said, no. He looked at the hand-drawn map. He looked at the 4 years of entries in the notebook. He looked at the receipt he kept in his coat pocket. 280 acres on 3 sides of his strip, owned by one developer, locked behind a piece of paper from 1956 that nobody but Henry had read in 50 years. He closed the notebook. He turned out the kitchen light. The trap was set. Now he only had to wait. A black sedan pulled into the driveway on a Wednesday morning in May 2007. Henry set his coffee cup down on the porch rail before the man at the wheel had finished parking. The man got out, late 20s, pressed blue shirt, tan slacks, leather portfolio. He smiled the way young men smile when they think they are about to win something. He said his name was Trent Mallory. He said he represented a private buyer. He said the buyer was prepared to offer $12,000 for Lot 17B. Henry listened. He thanked him. He said, no, thank you. Trent blinked. He laughed a little. He said maybe Henry didn't understand. $12,000 for a strip of weeds. Henry said, I understood. Trent left a card on the porch rail next to the coffee cup. Henry did not pick it up. The phone call came 8 months later. It was a man named Phil Dorsey from the County Economic Development Office. His voice was warm and official. He said the county was very interested in acquiring Lot 17B for, as he put it, future infrastructure planning. He said the county was prepared to offer $45,000. Henry was at the kitchen table. The notebook was open in front of him. Marlene was reading the paper across from him. Henry said, I appreciate the call, Phil. The answer is no. Phil paused. He said offers like this didn't come twice. Henry said, I know. He hung up. Marlene turned a page of the paper. She said, 45,000? He said, yes. She said, 3 more years passed. Henry mowed the strip twice a year. He paid the tax bill every spring, $16.40 in cash at the county clerk's office. He kept every receipt in a tin box on the top shelf of the closet. In the summer of 2009, his daughter Claire came down from Atlanta. She was 24. She was finishing her 2nd year of law school. She rode out to the strip with him in the truck. She stood at the edge of the red clay. She said, Daddy, why do you keep this? Henry leaned on the hood of the truck. He said, because someone forgot it was here. She let it go. She would remember the line years later. Meanwhile, on the 32nd floor of a building on Peachtree Street, Walter Greaves slammed a folder onto a conference table. He was 54 now. His project was called the Boone Hollow Logistics Park. 8 years in the making, the largest deal of his career. He had 280 acres. He could not move a single load of dirt. His engineer had explained it 3 times. Nothing on the site could connect to Highway 41 without crossing Lot 17B. Walter shouted at his lawyer. Someone said, just buy the strip. Walter said, we have been trying. The third offer came on a Tuesday afternoon in October 2010. Henry was in the front yard, repairing a fence post, when the silver Mercedes pulled up. One man behind the wheel, mid-50s, 3-piece suit, charcoal gray, leather briefcase. He introduced himself as Daniel Hutch, senior counsel for Greaves Capital Partners. He asked if he could come inside. Henry brought him to the kitchen. Marlene poured coffee for 3, set the cups down, and left the room. Daniel Hutch slid a check across the table. It was made out to Henry Voss for $180,000. He said, we'd like to close this today. Henry looked at the check. He looked at his coffee cup. He looked at Daniel Hutch. He said, no. The lawyer's smile faltered. He recovered. He said the offer was very generous. He said this could be done quickly and cleanly. Henry pushed the check back across the table. He said, tell Mr. Greaves I remember him. Daniel Hutch did not understand. He left. 5 years passed. The offer stopped. The fence around the 80 acres started to rust. The orange survey flags faded to white. The signs that said Greaves Capital Partners were taken down. Henry kept paying the tax bill. He kept mowing the strip. He kept the receipt in his coat pocket. Marlene asked once in the winter of 2014 if he ever worried they had gone away for good. Henry said, they can't. She said, why not? He said, because the land is still there. On a Tuesday morning in February 2025, the kitchen phone rang. Henry was eating toast. Marlene was at the sink. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. An Atlanta area code, a name Henry did not know. He set down his coffee. He let it ring twice. He put his hand on the receiver. Henry picked up on the third ring, and Daniel Hutch was already talking. The lawyer's voice was thinner than it had been in 2010. He said the number out loud before he said hello. $460,000. It was supposed to feel like a lot. Henry said, no. Daniel Hutch said, wait, Mr. Voss, please. Henry hung up. He looked at Marlene. She was already drying her hands. He said, call Claire. Claire drove down from Atlanta on Saturday. She was 39 now. She had been a property lawyer for 11 years. She worked at a small firm in Buckhead. She specialized in easements, corridor reservations, and old county filings, though no one in the family had ever asked her how she had picked that. She set her bag on the kitchen table. She did not say anything for a long time. Henry slid 3 things across the table to her: the original deed for Lot 17B, the notebook, and a folded photocopy of Resolution 56-114. Claire read in silence for 40 minutes. Marlene poured coffee. She set Claire's cup down without a word. Claire looked up. She said, Daddy, did you know in 2002? Henry said, yes. She nodded once. She picked up her phone. She said, I'll call him. The hearing was held in the Boone County Courthouse on a Thursday morning in April 2025. The same room where the auction had happened 23 years earlier. Walter Greaves was 64 now. He sat at the plaintiff's table in a navy suit and a thin gold watch. He did not look at Henry. His lawyers had filed an abandonment claim against Lot 17B. They argued the corridor reservation had been functionally abandoned by the county over decades of disuse. They argued the strip should revert to the adjacent landowners, meaning in practice to Greaves Capital Partners. Claire stood at the defense table. She wore a black suit. She placed 3 documents in front of the judge. The first was the original 1956 resolution. The second was a letter from the Boone County Roads Department dated 1979, reaffirming the corridor reservation in writing. The third was a stack of tax records, 63 years of them, every single annual assessment from 1962 through 2024, showing that the county had taxed Lot 17B as an active parcel every year without interruption. She said one line. She said, Your Honor, you cannot abandon land you keep taxing. The judge read for less than a minute. He looked at Walter Greaves's lawyers. He said, Motion denied. Walter Greaves's lawyer reached for his phone before the gavel finished sounding. The negotiation took 2 weeks. Greaves Capital Partners came back with a new offer, $600,000. Henry refused. Then $750,000. Henry refused. Claire spoke for him. She said her father did not want a one-time payment. She said he wanted an easement. She laid out the terms. A perpetual easement payment of $9,400 per month, adjusted for inflation, transferable to his heirs, paid the first of every month for as long as the logistics park operated on the surrounding 280 acres. Daniel Hutch pushed back on the inflation clause. Claire held. He pushed back on the heirs clause. Claire held. He accepted every term. He signed the agreement in a conference room in Atlanta on the morning of May 12, 2025. Claire called Henry from the parking garage. She said, It's done, Daddy. Henry was at the kitchen table. He said, Good, tell your mother. He hung up. Marlene was already standing. She did not ask. She walked to the stove and put the kettle on. The signing at the county clerk's office was on a Friday. Henry wore a clean shirt. He brought the notebook. He brought the receipt from 2002, still folded twice, still in the inside pocket of the same coat. He signed his name. The clerk stamped the document. She slid him the copy. He walked out into the parking lot. He got in his truck. He sat there for a moment with the door open. The afternoon was warm. The light was going long. He took the notebook out of the glove box. He turned to the last page. He took the pencil from behind his ear. He wrote one line. March 2002. May 2025. Closed. He shut the notebook. He put it back in the glove box. He drove home the long way, past the south end of the county, past the 280 acres, past the strip of red clay that paid him every month now for the rest of his life. The local paper ran the story on a Tuesday. 2 columns, page 3. A photo of the courthouse. A short quote from the county clerk. Walter Greaves did not comment. He read the article alone in his office on the 32nd floor. He read it twice. He folded the paper and dropped it in the trash. He did not laugh. At Earl's Diner on Main Street, the 4 men who had leaned against the wall in 2002 read the same story over breakfast. One of them set down his fork. He said, "Well, I'll be damned." That was all anyone said. Some men collect deeds. Henry Voss collected the one piece of paper everyone else threw away. If you'd been Henry, would you have taken the $460,000 check or held out for the monthly deal? Tell me in the comments.